Welcome to Beyond Tech, where innovation meets insight.
We're your hosts, Slaght and Jennifer Palumbo. We bring curiosity and clarity and a passion for technology-driven storytelling to every conversation. Today, we're discussing the continually growing hot topic of cybersecurity and particularly how OT networks are vulnerable to cyber threats. We're welcoming Eric Medecke. Eric is the Director of IT/OT Solutions at eTech Group. He helps manufacturers secure and streamline industrial operations. He specializes in IT/OT risk assessments, cybersecurity systems, and advanced industrial networking solutions that both protect revenue and reputation. Eric is joined by Brian Gifford. Brian is an IT/OT cybersecurity engineering lead with over 2 decades of experience in systems engineering and information assurance. He specializes in securing and integrating OT and IT environments, helping manufacturers and critical infrastructure organizations reduce cyber risk and strengthen resilience.
All right, well, let's get into it. To start, Eric and Brian, what exactly do you mean by OT networks and how do they differ from traditional IT networks?
IT networks are traditionally a little bit different than our OT networks because our OT network are what we utilize to keep our plants running today. So they are a little bit different on the types of networks and the types of topologies and the things that we do in that environment that is a little bit different than the IT, how we do things in the IT world.
One of the really big things that differentiates OT and IT is OT usually has an impact in the real world. So OT, generally, you're having things that are going to have a physical impact, whereas IT is often just about moving information and dealing with information itself.
Fascinating. And why have OT networks become such a prime target for cyber attackers lately?
Our OT networks are prime targets for our cyber attackers, primarily because our OT networks are 10 to 15 years sometimes behind the times. Those networks, we've had engineers in different plants that have made them work over the years, but have never had the need to have connectivity to the cloud or ERP reporting or OE data collection, things like that. And so now as we have connected things to the internet and to the cloud, we are now more and more susceptible to security risks.
And it's that focus that we talked about earlier, right? So your OT networks are focused on accomplishing something in the real world. Their focus hasn't been data security. So they haven't been designed that way. And with a mean time between failure measured often in decades, it's something that's difficult for companies to put the funding behind in order to update. So that's one of the things that we're working toward, is offering solutions that will meet both those needs and the security requirements.
And these attacks can vary from everything to ransomware attacks, right? Where the attacker is asking the company to pay money to release the access to the system, all the way up to something that's really, really scary, which was, I think, an example of a water treatment facility almost being vulnerable to poisoning, right? Did you guys hear about this? It was in Florida, wasn't it?
So that was, I think it was fluoride. They were looking at an increase in fluoride contamination in the water sufficient to damage people. It's terrifying. And that's that real world consideration, right?
That's wild.
Why are OT networks often so far behind IT networks in terms of updates and best security practices?
The reason is because our OT plants do not typically update stuff. So there are no needs to update equipment that produces the same product over and over. So there has to be a cost, there's a cost associated with this. And if it doesn't help production, typically they don't update that type of equipment.
So while the product doesn't change and the production process doesn't change, the threat landscape really has. So what the threat actors want to accomplish, what they have access to, the impacts they can have on those networks, those have changed enormously, which is why there's such a growing focus on security in OT environments.
So these lack of regular updates and patches in the OT system, are they creating cybersecurity vulnerabilities for them?
Yes, actually they do. They create cybersecurity vulnerabilities, and more become apparent every day because our systems are outdated. So this is where we help to close that gap, to help secure these environments, to help come up with patching schedules, things of that nature that actually the OT environments can deal with on a regular shutdown.
Yep, it's not because the OT environments can't be secured, it's just because they haven't been inherently built with that security. So there are a lot of opportunities out there to improve that security, and many of them don't crush financially, but the impact of a cyber event can be excruciating. The Colonial Pipelines, for example, that was an 8-figure event. That's a massive change in that company's landscape. So it is something that really needs to be brought to the forefront, which is why we're doing stuff like this to make it more aware that those changes are something that can happen. They just need to be identified and executed.
Right. And to your point, there's a lot, it sounds like a lot of ways that attackers, because of outdated OT networks, it sounds like there's a lot of opportunity for attacks to happen. In your experience, how do they typically attack the OT networks? What's that typical entry point that folks would want to make sure they prioritize?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different things. Brian's a little more of an expert when it comes to cybersecurity side of it, but what they typically like to infiltrate is any possible insecure point of entry, things like remote access. So whether it's OEMs putting remote access devices in machinery like EWANs, things of that nature that circumvent the IT's security, or whether it's OEMs or somebody physically entering into the facility with something unknown that's lurking on their computer and they're allowing them to plug into the network. Those are just a couple of the ways that that the cyber attackers gain access to those types of networks.
The internet. So you have internet connected devices are the first point of entry for most of these things. Now there are social engineering attacks that will help people gain entry, but the biggest thing is, can they attack remotely? Because that solves a bunch of problems for the attackers. It means they don't have to expose themselves physically to the results of whatever they're doing. It means they can attack, they can research and attack a broad array of options and find one that works for them. And they can do that from the comfort of their own home or lair or whatever we want to call it. So internet facing stuff is the first point of entry generally. And a lot of times with OT networks, we use remote desktop management to access all of these things. So if they can find an internet-facing device that has remote desktop capability, it gives them a pivot point that we can get into other stuff. But that's only one of many ways of dealing with this stuff, and it depends on the goal of the attacker. If the goal is to make money, that's a good starting point. If their goal is to take down the enterprise for some reason, be it political or ideological, then they may do it a very different way, and it may be much more personal. They may actually arrive on site.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they're actually looking to hurt people, not necessarily with ransomware anymore, as to hurt companies more financially by getting in and manipulating data, so that the data, once it's manipulated, can hurt their financials over a long haul. So if so especially like if they're making lots for pharma or different types of things, or food and bev, to hurt them in a standpoint that, maybe their lot was bad or their batch was bad. And so that data is erroneous, and they've gone in and they've infiltrated the networks to make those changes to actually hurt those companies financially.
Wow. I had no idea the scale of it. That's no wonder it's such a big topic.
I would like to go back. I have a follow-up question about the data that you said they manipulate. So they're manipulating data. They're for, especially you mentioned pharma, the traceability and validation within pharma is such a big thing. So are they, by manipulating the data, the traceability of that batch is no longer valid? Is that what you mean by that?
Yeah, CFR 21, your FDA requirements, you have to have the ability to be inspected for that stuff. And if your historian data is damaged, if you have any doubt into the veracity of that data, it means that entire batch, because it's human, it's life safety, they're not going to be able to use that. So it's a massive financial impact.
Wow. Yeah, I had not heard that discussed before. So that's really interesting and scary.
It's super scary. And are you seeing this happening more and more within life sciences? And how prepared do you think that they are to address this?
Well, I think we see it across the board, not just in life sciences. I think we see it in all verticals right now. And so it's more and more prevalent, and we are doing everything we can to, stop this stuff from happening.
Yeah.
How real is the threat that a cyber attack on industrial networks could disrupt not only a critical infrastructure, but even the whole economy?
The capability is absolutely there. The question is your actor, do they have the ability to do it large scale? We've seen hits against small utilities. Colonial Pipeline is one example. There have been numerous strikes against electrical infrastructure. Russia spent a lot of time in the years before Crimea and before invading, testing the cyber warfare on the critical infrastructure in Ukraine, and it happened over and over and over. And they did it in a variety of ways. One year they hit a remote Windows machine that allowed them to control their infrastructure for the entire country. The next year, because they had fixed that patch, they hit one of their RTACs that was controlling it from a layer down. And the third year, because they had all the engineers waiting in the wings to be able to do local control on these substations, they actually found out who everyone's supervisors were and made phone calls to have these guys do local changes as a social engineering attack. So the ability to impact critical infrastructure on a large scale, it's there, and it is terrifying from a nation state standpoint. But that's from our job. Our job is to harden networks on a little smaller scale. Can we help out a company? Can we help out a facility? To do something on a larger scale is a little beyond our scope.
Right. And I would imagine that there's a lot of ways that attackers can harm a facility, but one thing we haven't discussed so far is IP as well. And can you talk a little bit about how an unsecured OT environment might open the door for something like that, some cyber-espionage, if you will, when it comes to stealing IP?
If you go to pharma, some of your recipes are built into the processes that you're setting up in your OT environment. Mm-hmm. If someone was able to get in there and grab a recipe for something, you can't get that back. Once information has become open source, it doesn't become otherwise. It's very difficult to retain.
Right. And again, to your point, these are expensive. Expensive probably doesn't even really describe something when you're talking about an investment into a new drug that you're trying to manufacture and bring to market, right?
Sure. It's the result of millions or billions in development. And to have someone pick up the recipe and know the answer at the end of all that that's all money gone.
Wild. Absolutely wild.
So I think you have kind of hit on this a little bit, but just to kind of bring it back, what are the most common vulnerabilities that you see in OT networks, and how can manufacturers reduce these vulnerabilities?
I think one of the biggest vulnerabilities we see is proper segmentation and security on the OT side. The lack of just the simple thing that you would think of as a firewall. The lack of the firewalls and the segmentation of each area to prevent, east-west movement on the networks, not just their north-south type traffic. So we see those types of things a lot.
Yeah, and I can't emphasize microsegmentation enough. There are some devices in your PLCs that act as rings, and those need to be able to talk laterally to each other. But most devices on most networks need to talk from the client to the server. They don't need to talk client to client. So being able to segment your network so that clients can't talk to each other means that if one of the clients gets infected, and your servers are protected, it means it can't transition to another spot. It's stuck in that location, and we have the ability to isolate it, to identify it, and to fix it without it spreading to other pieces.
I feel like the first half of this conversation has been really scary, which it should be, right? I mean, we want people to be aware of how serious the threat is, and that it doesn't seem to discriminate either for industry or type of manufacturing process or anything like that. But let's give some people some brightness. Let's give them some hope. I'm sure that you guys see companies that are well behind where they should be in terms of protecting themselves against these kinds of threats. So what are like some things that they can do? Like, what would you say is the first step that a company can take today to improve their OT security posture?
Yeah, so one of the things we work with a lot of companies, the first step typically is we go in and we assess, what is their current state, what's connected to what's talking to what does their security posture look like, where are their vulnerabilities, and we take that information and we're able to take that information and give that back to them and help them to put a path forward, right? Because not everybody has the open checkbook at the end of the day. So with these assessments,
right,
which are very feasible and cost effective, we can take that information and create that path forward for our end user so that we can get them to at least to be as secure as they can be, with the funding that they have available.
It's really hard to move forward if you don't know exactly what is currently in your facility or how it's set up. So
just like the attacks, the first step in any attack is reconnaissance. The first step in any security plan is reconnaissance too. We need to know exactly what's there and what the issues are. And this assessment is the best first critical step for that piece.
And I think it's also probably important that we emphasize that it's, the assessment is the first step, but don't have to address everything at one time. There can be a kind of phased approach to address what's most critical first, low-hanging fruit, and kind of start working towards that more secure posture plan.
Yep. And our assessments do that. We do identify things by criticality, and we identify what the easiest things to implement are, what the most effective ones are, and we try to meet those too.
So one of the other things that I think I've heard again and again when talking is that the IT most of these facilities have their own IT teams and their OT teams. They don't necessarily get along. So is there anything that we can do to kind of help these teams better communicate and work together, which they definitely need to as more things are becoming connected to the internet and just, I guess, have different these teams have different goals, so they have different priorities, and how can we help them get along?
Yeah. So Jackie, that's a great thing there, because we run into it all the time. The OT and the IT, they butt heads. So what we do is we typically go in and we're supporting the OT environment first and foremost, right? Because we understand what their needs are. But in order to do that, we have to get IT involved. So what we like to do is find out what it is that the OT environment and the objectives are for that client. And then once we understand what those are, then we usually get engaged with their IT department. And the question we like to ask the IT department is, what are you doing today to support the efforts in the OT space, right? And so basically what we want to do is we want to listen and understand what the IT department's goals are, because we understand what the security and everything that's needed in the OT. And sometimes the IT departments don't understand this a lot of times. So by us understanding what their agenda is, which is probably insurance causing them to meet compliance, to meet cybersecurity regulations, to drive their insurance costs down, and the need to own the network and in the need to own the OT environment as well, which therefore, when they don't understand, they can break things in the OT environment, then it's do we really want to be involved in that or not? When we really do want the IT departments involved in what we're doing in the OT space.
We manage a lot of stuff by risk, right? So we look at what's the risk of someone attacking us? What's the risk to production? From you had mentioned that there's two different goals there, that the OT and the IT have a very different set of goals. And that is 100% true. The risks are different too. For IT, their risk is breaking something in OT, right? They're curious because they don't necessarily have the experience, just like Eric mentioned, that, PLCs have a very low tolerance for a change in latency. So in IT, if we're a few milliseconds off, not a big deal. If we're a few milliseconds off in OT, that's really bad news. So doing a network scan, if I do that in an OT environment, I might break a lot of things. So being able to work between those two, I think communication is probably the biggest reason that IT and OT don't work well together. They have different goals and they have different needs, and they are both task saturated. So being able to communicate effectively between those two groups is what will solve those problems. And that's one of the things the assessment does. When we produce that product, it gives them the ability to see what they need to do from both sides of things. And it gives them a starting point to start connecting and talking through what the response and what the result is going to be.
I would imagine that part of the output of the assessment, of course, is this report and a plan. I would imagine that this goes pretty high up to the top for a company, given the level of risk. Do you see that these right? Well, yeah, that's a good point. I guess, do you see that? And my follow-on question was, do you see these being used in other ways, maybe for getting funding for insurance purposes or for strategic purposes? Have you seen anything like that, or do you think that's how we should be looking at them?
Eric had mentioned baselines earlier, that a lot of times the IT networks, they don't really have a solid understanding of what they have in their network at this time. And it drifts. As we get new equipment, as we make changes to configurations, we don't always capture that stuff in the right way. So one of the things this does is it offers value from that standpoint. It gives us the ability to offer them something immediately out of the gate that they can use. And I think that answers part of your question. That's something that
right.
I mean, Jen, to your point, we do see these reports landing in the laps of C-level people. And the way that they're geared so the executive summaries are in layman's terms, so that they kind of get an idea. They know we've done this assessment, but what did we really get from it, and what from a high level do we really need to address? So it has that, but it also has the ability for that person, if they've got extended knowledge or they want to dive a little deeper into these reports, that they have the ease and ability to do it with their team or on their own. And it helps to drive, like you said, the financial aspects and getting things remediated along the way.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine that these could be a tool for the IT and the OT folks to to bring this to their leadership team and have it be a part of strategic protection of the company, avoiding some of these costly, unfortunate incidents where you do end up with a cyber attack. But there's some positive benefits to it as well, right? I mean, it's not all simply protecting yourself against an attack. I would imagine there's some positivity that comes out of it too by upgrading, right?
Yep. And asset management, identifying things that are on your network you didn't realize were still there, or the way that you approach resource usage. I mean, absolutely, there are things there that aren't necessarily identifying a cybersecurity risk, but just basic management and maintenance, things that can help to save money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think at one point in another conversation that we had, and you hit on it a little bit, but the potential of an IT/OT assessment leading to reduction in cybersecurity insurance premiums, or I guess I know we've heard of clients who use the assessment to get the insurance protection back active, I guess, for their facility.
Yep. Aligning to a cybersecurity framework is generally what those cybersecurity and the cyber insurance is looking for. If you are aligned to a framework and you're meeting those security needs, then the premiums drop. And these assessments are a first step to making sure that you are aligned, or if you're not aligned, finding out what you need to change to make yourself become so. And they can also validate for the cyber insurance providers that you are. So it helps to support that from a financial standpoint to reduce those premiums.
Well, and to add to that, as part of some of these assessments, depending on how deep we go, what are the client needs, we do this compliance piece of the puzzle, like Brian was saying, where we work to maybe they're required to adhere to NIST regulations or things like that, or whatever it is for their insurance. And so what we can do through these assessments is we can actually take and apply all of the findings to the guidelines to get them to a compliant state. And then what they can do is they can in turn take this information, rather than filling out the form that their insurance company asks them to fill out, we turn the tables and we give this document, the system security plan, back to the insurance company. And we say, here, the burden of proof is on you, whether or not you want to insure us based upon these things that we are doing in our facility. Therefore, in the event of an issue or an outbreak or something crazy, now, it was on the insurance company to insure you, not a mistake that you might have made in the documentation that they asked you to fill out.
All right, we've asked you guys to offer some upfront, quick things that people could take advantage of now, or ways that they could start to protect themselves right off the bat. Now I'm going to ask you to look a little bit farther into the future, pull out your crystal ball if you have one, and let's talk about how the threat landscape is going to continue to evolve over the next 5 years, especially as everything is powered by AI, right?
That's the big one.
There's more connected systems, there's more connected devices, there's AI and I feel like everything. So what are you guys seeing, and what do you think we will see more of?
I would say we're going to start seeing AI-powered defenses, and we're already seeing some products that are based upon that. So the ability for AI to look for the weakest link is one of the biggest things from a threat standpoint, because they will look at scans, and there are open source scans, companies like Shodan, that will take a look at the internet as a whole, and they'll give you an idea of what ports and protocols are open in any given environment. And so finding that basic information to go out and kind of narrow in your reconnaissance phase, if you're a bad actor, and the AI can make that seamless and quick. They can identify something within a very narrow scope. They can give it very specific parameters. I want somebody who's in an OT environment who has these PLCs, or who has access to this, outdated SMB protocol or whatever it is, and they can identify a list of, say, 40 targets. And then they do a little open source research, and they find out if those companies have a large market capitalization, or if they have a big product that's coming to market, or if there's an initial public offering coming up, something that makes them a juicier target. It allows them to target a much wider group very narrowly, very quickly. But on our side, the defensive side, it means that we can identify some of those actions very easily. We can identify the way that we look on the outside of our network. We can identify what actions are happening inside our network in a very granular way. So I think the threat landscape, and on both sides of that, the offensive and the defensive side,
Right.
You're going to see a lot more automation, and you're going to see things that happen very, very quickly. But you're also seeing some pretty amazing tools that are making it much more secure. And if things do happen, the impact is being minimized.
Well, that's encouraging.
Yeah, I said this is a Jen, you said earlier, it's a kind of a scary episode, but it sounds like there's ways that and actions that can be taken to protect and get some defenses for clients, potential clients, anyone listening. There's hope.
AI can use its powers for good, not just evil.
Yes.
Well, I hope so, because my beloved ChatGPT can't be doing me dirty. Let's stay on this for just another minute, if you're okay with it, because we talk about automation. We were all work in automation. We know that automation is continuing to change the landscape of industry, manufacturing, and jobs that used to exist don't exist anymore. But that just means that folks are doing other things. They're doing different jobs, and jobs that didn't exist, 40 years ago exist now because of things like automation. Do you think that you will see more, hopefully, cybersecurity roles, or do you see where do you think that's going to go in the way of what people will be doing?
So where do I feel like the roles and people are, where people are going with this? I think you still find a lot of people are going to be probably going to third-party resources because they don't necessarily have the ability to have these types of teams in-house. I mean, we're lucky to have the people like Brian on our team, cybersecurity experts who can go after this type of stuff for our customers at a very effective cost. So that's kind of where I think it's going, because there's not a ton of Brians running around at the end of the day.
Right.
Thank goodness.
It's always good to have job security. Well, and I know that a lot of these cybersecurity certifications are really hard to obtain. They often take years, if not more, of experience and some pretty rigorous testing experience. But yeah, I was just curious if you guys had any thoughts about how the role of somebody in manufacturing might evolve as these threats and continue to evolve.
You're going to see a fork between specialists and generalists. I think you're going to see stuff like AI power that will take your low-level operators in cybersecurity and make them very, very good at a wide variety of things at a low level. That's going to be your generalists. And then you're going to see a need, because things are going to accelerate so rapidly and it's going to become very complex. You're going to see people that need to silo very specifically into very small disciplines and dive very deeply into protocols and at a very high level. And I think it's going to be an interesting split, because you're going to have those people starting off in the industry that will be in these generalist positions that will have to choose a specialty, that will have to really dig into those pieces. And I think it's going to be a very interesting landscape in 15 years to see what changes and what those specialties look like. Buggy Whip Enterprise, a lot of this stuff is changing what's going to be a requirement and what's going to disappear. You're absolutely right.
But when you talk about, Jen, the roles, like maybe in our industrial environments, and what the staffing, like those roles are and how that's going to evolve, I guess I didn't really touch on that. But if you look at it right now, you're going to have the same, probably the same people going to be held more responsible. And we are seeing that now, where the plant engineers are being held responsible. And there's financial things like their bonuses and things like that are tied to them being responsible for the security from the plant side of it. So we've run across this already. And I think that's where you're going to have those people who don't have that expertise will be reaching out to third-party vendors.
Right. Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, I got to tell you guys, up until recently, my experience with cybersecurity was around the 90s movie Hackers. So this has been
Angelina
very
Jolie
helpful.
In her early years.
And it was. Yeah, it's a great flick. Well, it's not really that great, but
it's terrible, but it's awesome.
But it is. And I really appreciated this conversation. I've learned a lot. Thanks for taking the time.
Before we let you go, I do like to end on a few less technical, more fun questions.
Oh boy.
So my first one, and I have so many good answers for this one, is what is one thing in your life that you would like to automate?
Boy.
Oh my goodness, I silenced the crowd.
So I've automated most of the things I want to automate, but what else would I automate? I don't know. Bringing my kids to practice. I think that's the next one.
That's a common
That's a big one.
Mine is laundry and dishes.
Probably automate my workload.
Ooh.
Yeah, I feel that.
All right. Now, you guys both have, I think, pretty technical jobs and are very smart people. But how would you describe your job to a 5-year-old?
So I've been asked this question many times by my kids, and I turned to them and I said, well, if it's going to be easy for you to remember, just remember professional problem solver. And I'm like, that's just the easiest way to do it, because, I get to go out and listen to people's woes all the time and try to help them to develop a path forward. And so that's really what I do.
Love that.
So I saw this broken down in a cartoon once that really kind of spoke to me. So I sit and I look at a screen that has colors on it. And if I don't like the colors, I make changes on my keyboard and my mouse until I like the colors again. That's my
awesome.
job.
I love that.
I have one more question, and this one should be super easy. What would you like to see us cover on future episodes of Beyond Tech?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say diving into some specific easy to implement use cases for security would probably be a great thing. And then maybe some success stories. I think we've already had some great success with some of the products we've done. And I would love to be able to share some of the ways we've improved some of our clients.
That's awesome.
Like Eric agrees, he's nodding. Well, luckily we have two experts that I think I know we could tap for something like that. Right, Jackie?
I think so. You guys can be our first repeat guest.
I think it would be great, though. It sounds like there's a lot of really helpful information that we can continue. So maybe having a series like that would be a great thing and a great help to our audience. Yeah, that would be great if you guys were open to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anything that we can provide that would give a benefit to somebody would be, awesome.
Great.
Well, I will be reaching out and we'll schedule a follow-up. But I thank you guys for being here with us and spending a little bit of time this afternoon talking about this. Hope you guys have a good rest of your day, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I feel like I did and learned a little bit too.
Me too. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Take care, guys.